welcome to Joline Knits A Lot. This is my show about knitting and crocheting and other crafty things that I get up to. I know I say crocheting and I don't crochet a ton, but I promise every once in a while I'm going to surprise you with some crochet. So how have you been? How are things? It is sort of the middle of March-ish, and here in Edmonton, Alberta, we're having first spring. Often we have first spring followed by a massive snowfall and it gets cold, and then maybe we have second spring, and then we'll have third winter in about April or May when we get possibly a little bit more snow, and then it's for sure spring by May long weekend, and that's when you can plant your garden. I know that the weather is important to you, my viewers. Probably not. But anyway, that's life here in Edmonton. We have spring, and then we have a little bit more winter, and then we have spring, and we have a little bit more winter. The same is true in the fall. Often we'll get fall, and then a little bit more summer, and then fall, and then a little bit more summer, followed by first winter. All of this can be found in your Farmer's Almanac. If you are into the Farmer's Almanac. I remember buying the Farmer's Almanac for my dad when I was a kid. And he would read it every year. I don't know how accurate it was or how much he actually put stock into it, but there's always something in there interesting for him. Anyway, this is not a show about the weather or the Farmer's Almanac. This is a show about crafting. How are your crafts coming along? Do you find that in the spring your mood changes and what you want to knit completely shifts? I know mine did, especially this last week. I've had a very different focus, or when I look at new patterns, I'm drawn to different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that are catching my interest right now in terms of new patterns or things I want to be knitting. But first, let's talk about things I have knit, like this sweater. This is the Seli sweater. I finally finished it, and I think it fits really great. I'm going to put some pictures up here of my whole body, and not just me, like from the neck up, like some weird sort of Barbie doll head. Like the opposite of a Barbie doll, with short dark hair and dark eyes, and not big blonde bouffant hairdo. Anyway, all of that to say that this is what I look like in my sweater. I finished it, I blocked it. When I tried this sweater on right when it was off the needles, it was definitely more snug, but I blocked it and it grew a bit widthwise, which I'm really happy about. I'm quite happy with the fit, and I'm really happy with the sleeves. They turned out great, although I know I've talked to you before about how I have short arms, and I thought that I had sort of taken that into account, but as you can see, these sleeves are a little bit long, but really nice looking. So I'll probably just wear it like this because I really like the way it looks. I'm quite happy with it. The one thing that I did a couple things when I was knitting this sweater. I purposely tried to knit the sleeves a bit shorter. They ended up a little bit long, but I'm okay with that. I knit the body a little bit longer too, because cropped isn't quite in my comfort zone at this time. But the one thing that I think that I'm going to do now that it's all finished and I'm wearing it is take out my bind off at the bottom hem. I did like a regular bind off because I didn't want it to be too stretchy, but I'm finding that the bind off that I did is a little bit too snug, and I think that I'd be happier with it if I pulled it all out and redid the bind off with a slightly stretchier bind off. My stretchy bind off of choice is one that I learned, this was a number of years ago, from Lucy Neatby. Lucy Neatby is a really, really interesting knitting teacher. I took a class with her, I'm going to say like 14 years ago. I remember my oldest daughter was just a baby. Like, not a baby, she was maybe a year old. She was very small, and a friend and I took a one-day class with Lucy Neatby, and it was all about knitting tricks and just interesting things about knitting, different ways to bind off, cast on, tricks on how to seam things. Like, it was just a really, really great day, and I learned a lot, and that's where I learned this bind off. It's, and probably there's a name for it, I'm sure, and a lot of you maybe know it too. It's when you knit one stitch, and then you knit a second stitch, and then you knit those 2 stitches together through the back loop, and then you knit a stitch and you knit those 2 stitches together through the back loop, and that creates a stretchier bind off than just knitting a stitch, pulling it over, knitting a stitch, pulling it over. So I think what I'm going to do is take out the bind off edge on this sweater and do that stretchier bind off. I did my regular just pulling it over bind off because I wanted these edges to be more firm, and I did that at the wrist and at the neckline, which I think is fine for those edges are stretchy enough but have that firmness to not like, for example, if I used a stretchier bind off here, that this neckline might in time pull down, and I think with a firm cast off here, I think it's going to be fine. Same with the sleeves, but for where my hips are, I think I'd like a little bit more room. So I think I'll be changing that bind off, but otherwise I'm really happy with this sweater. I knit it in Sheepy's Metropolis, and I used 3 different colorways. I used Alexandria, which is this yellow color, but the yellow has like hints of peach or pink in it. It's really pretty because it's not just a flat yellow color. It has a lot of interest to it, and I'm quite happy with it. I used Miami, which I still don't understand why this deep charcoal gray is Miami. But I also use Warsaw here and here and all the way down the sleeve, which is my favorite Sheepy's Metropolis colorway, and really the most perfect gray if you're looking for it. All of this yarn was purchased at the Fiber Nook. They had the complete line of Sheepy's Metropolis, which, like, if there's a color you're looking for, there's a Metropolis for you. Sometimes I question the name of the city to the color, but in the end, there's such a wide variety of colors that is a really delightful yarn to work with, and I've certainly knit socks with it. And now this is my first garment, and I'm quite happy with it. How it feels, it's really soft. It blocked out really nicely. I'm looking forward to seeing how this sweater wears in terms of pilling. So that'll be interesting, and I'll get back to you. But this interesting detail of this slipped or woven stitches really turned out nicely after I blocked it. The pattern recommended just to do like a light steam blocking, but I went ahead and soaked the thing and laid it out. And I think that all of this delicate weaving really stood up to that. So I'm quite happy with it. And that's my Seli sweater. Yay! It is in the most recent issue of Lena magazine, and it's a pattern by Alex Bird. She has some other interesting patterns out now using this same woven, I think it's called Rusamim, I'm sure I said that wrong, technique. Alex Bird. Have a look at her patterns, because if this interests you, you might want to start on something smaller. I know she has, I believe, a hat, a cowl, and some wrist warmers or mittens, or both, just as options if you want to try this technique out. And I can heartily recommend Sheepy's Metropolis for your weaving, knitting pleasure. I finished something else this week, and it's huge, and I'm going to have to insert some pictures because there is no way I could possibly get this whole thing in the camera. But let me see if I can find the starting point. I finished my Birds of a Feather shawl, and it is just huge. Oh, there's no way I can fit all this in. Let me see if I can show you the, there's the bottom of that triangular bit, and then the second half. The last section has got these stripes with the colors, the contrasting mohair, in my case alpaca, and the fingering weight, which is really quite interesting. The thing that is really interesting about this shawl, or schlanket, because it's huge, is that it's super lightweight, but it's super warm. Last night I was watching a TV show with my oldest daughter, and I had it kind of draped across her while I was snipping the edges off, and it was really warm, surprisingly warm for something this light. This is the Birds of the Feather shawl. It's a pattern by Andrea Mowry, It can be found in one of the earlier issues of Lane magazine, but I think it's can be found as an individual pattern on Ravelry now. I used Labiana May in a single ply yarn. That's this one with the peaches and the yellows and the deep purples, in a color called, I think, Reunite. And then my Surrey Alpaca Silk is a yarn by Lillian Pine in the Ballet Slippers colorway. I'm really happy with this, how this turned out. Although, like, let me tell you, it's really, really big. I was trying it on earlier just to see how I would wear it, and I draped it over my shoulders and let the tails hang down, and they came to my shins. Now, I'm not an especially tall person. I'm about 5'5", if I round up, on a good day, in thick socks. So this shawl on me is really, really big, but it's also quite lightweight, and so just to drape around my neck like this with sort of longer tails is probably how I will wear it. The other thing I can do is take these tails and tie them in sort of a semi-attractive knot, if I can figure out how to do that. And so that's something else that I can do just to give it some structure. But it's really lightweight and really warm. I really like the colors. I think that having that like pop of color with a bit of a neutral is something that I could wear in the spring and the fall and through the winter, I think. It's super soft. It's very drapey. I'm really happy with it. But if you are sort of a smaller, not as tall person, keep in mind that this thing is very big. The pattern says it is about 102 inches wide, I think, when you're finished it. It's big. And that's not to say that you can't knit, you shouldn't knit it if you are a shorter person, but be prepared to know that you're probably gonna have to wrap it around yourself a few times because it's really long. But having said that, a shorter shawl or a shorter scarf is a difficult thing too if you can't wrap it around yourself and make it stay. So one of the benefits of a really long shawl is that this thing isn't going anywhere because the tails are so long they're just going to hang down. And that's my Birds of a Feather shawl. Just like it. Really big scarf. I used about 1.5 balls of each of these yarns. So I used about 150 grams of the skinny single, and I used about 65 maybe grams of the Surrey Alpaca Silk, which comes as a 50-gram ball. So just know that if you're going to knit it, you are going to need more than 1 ball of each. Although I think that this would be an interesting knit if you used more than 2 colors. Like, because of the way that the stripes are set out and they're alternating, I think it invites you to play with colors in a different way. And so that would be really interesting to do too. So I have a couple of cast-ons that you haven't seen. And the first one is something that's been on my mind for quite some time. I design a little bit when I have time and energy for it. COVID certainly has sucked my creative juices a little bit. It's been hard to have the mind space or the time or the freedom, mental lightness, I guess, to create new things. And so during COVID, it's been easier for me to just pick up something simple or somebody else's design just to work on, because I don't have the mental capacity or the energy to put into my own designs. But I've had something that's been on my mind or in the back of my mind for quite some time, and I finally cast it on. This is my own design. Just a minute. It's a sweater, a pullover, and I'm knitting it using Farmer's Daughter's fibers. This is yarn that I picked up at a Knit City event in, must have been 2019. the last Knit City there was in person in Vancouver. And I got to meet Candace of Farmer's Daughter. She was there selling her yarn. And I picked up some of her Juicy DK. Juicy DK is a really plump and drapey DK yarn. It's really been lovely to work with. And so I had sort of a sweater in mind, and at the time I had only picked up 2 colors. And as time went on and I sort of had this pattern, I was thinking about it, or how I would make it happen, or how I wanted it to look in the end, I decided that I needed a 3rd color. And so I picked up a skein of Farmer's Daughter in the Odang, which is a Seri alpaca silk. That yarn I've held double, so it's really quite fluffy and lovely. And this is my design so far. It is a top-down circular yoke, and I've used oh shoot, I'm gonna have to put the colors up here because I can't quite remember what the names of them are. I don't know if I wrote them down. No, I'm sure I didn't. But I'm using this light mauve-y kind of dusty pink mauve color as the background. And then I started the circular yoke using that Seri alpaca silk held double. I'm gonna just bunch this up a bit so maybe you can see it better. And that really gave me a heftier weight contrast color that I could then insert these pretty roses into. These roses are from Ukrainian embroidery book of patterns that I have from my mom. This is a pattern that was embroidered on blouses that I wore. So this is the same pattern but reinterpreted in a knitted garment. And I'm really happy with how it's turning out. I'm almost at the point where I'm going to divide for the sleeves. So I'm about, let's see if we can see. There we go. I'm almost there. And I think that this is really pretty. I love the colors. They remind me of like an antique china cup, or sort of a vintage blouse from maybe the 40s or 50s, but sort of with this nod to my heritage and my past and things that were sort of important to me growing up. So I am really happy with how this is turning out. I think that I have a name for it, but I won't tell you, because if I tell you the name and I change it, then I don't want anyone to be confused. But I'm really happy with how this is progressing so far. I have an idea for how I want the sleeves to look. So hopefully by the time we meet again, I'll have a sleeve to show you and to share with you. And I already have some ideas on how I might use this rose pattern again, reinterpreted in a different way. So it's been really, really nice for me to sort of revisit this part of my creativity, my craft, and making my own designs and seeing something that I had in my mind coming to life on my needles. So this has been something I've really been enjoying working on slowly but surely. I'll keep you updated on how this pattern is going. I'm slowly writing it while I'm knitting it. But I'm really happy with that color. Isn't that a pretty color? Anyway, I'll let you know how it comes along. The one thing I did want to let you know is that because the yarn that I'm using for the body, here's 2 balls that I'm using, it's quite tonal, as you can see, and I really, really like that. I'm not sure if you can see there's like pops of like a deep burgundy and gold and brown. It's just really, really beautifully dyed. But because it is hand-dyed and unique, I am using the helical knitting method on the body to try and not get too much pooling happening. So helical knitting is when you use 2 balls of yarn at the same time. That's why I have these two. And the two yarns sort of chase each other around. There's lots of videos on how to do helical knitting. So I'm not going to do a tutorial because much better teachers than I have done those already. But I did want to let you know just a little bit about how it's done and why you might do it. So helical knitting is when you have two yarns knitting a tube. And if you think of a tube, it's constantly going up and up and up in a slow sort of incline, if you will. And the idea behind helical knitting is that you've got two yarns sort of chasing each other up this incline. So they never quite meet. It's like a double helix in DNA, if you think about it that way, but kind of more compressed. So the two yarns are always chasing each other around and around up the tube, but they never meet. And so it allows you to alternate skeins of yarn every round without having a jog or a join. And it's something that I have tried in the past. I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at it. Every time I try it, I get a little better. The one thing that I've learned this time is that when you do helical knitting, you knit with one skein all the way around your piece of work until three stitches three. I can't hold my fingers up like that. Three stitches before where the other skein starts. Then you stop. You drop that skein or that strand of yarn. You slip 3 stitches, and then you start knitting with the other ball. And this allows for a gradual sort of interchange of those two skeins. But when you slip those 3 stitches, they may have become loose or loose, for lack of a better word, since you knit them on the previous round. So what I've been doing is slipping those 3 stitches and onto my right needle, and then sort of using my left needle just to snug them up a little bit. I don't want them to be super tight. I don't want them to be tighter than the stitches around them, but I don't want them to be looser either. So I just snug them up a little bit with my needle and then carry on knitting. And I think that I'm getting a pretty good effect. The yarn is just beautiful. I love the color. I'm really happy with it. And I think for me this will be a very good color. But I'll let you know how it goes. I'm looking forward to seeing how the pattern progresses and how the design progresses, and I'm happy to share that with you as we go. So this is my own design that I will hopefully be writing up soon as I work through it. But I hope you like it, and if you have comments or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. I really appreciate hearing what you think. So this last week, I've had a couple things interest me in terms of knitting. I've only had this sweater design on the needles, and I kind of wanted something small that I could knit and get some finish something quickly and get some satisfaction, but also just to feel like I'm being productive, because when you're always working on big projects, they can feel a little bit daunting because they take so much more time. So the other day I cast on a pair of socks and I finished one of them. These are the Chuck socks, and I've knit these socks before. I've always been in the search for a nice pair of sneaker socks that I could knit. And by sneaker socks, I mean socks with a really wide ankle opening that you wouldn't see if you were wearing sneakers like my Converse sneakers, which are my favorite. The Chuck pattern is a pattern specifically designed to be worn with Converse sneakers, and I've knit them before, and that pair was quite quickly stolen by my youngest daughter, which is fine. She wears them a lot, and that's great. So I decided I would just use some leftover yarn that I had lying around and whip up a pair for myself. And I finished the first sock. So this is the Chuck sock, and I knit it in mustache yarn in some leftover Lando colorway, which is named for Lando Calrissian, that charming cape-wearing character from Star Wars. And as you can see, this sock construction is different than a lot of socks that you'll see. You cast on along this edge here, and then knit down a bit, knit a little flappy flap, and then knit a section here before joining the whole thing in the round and knitting to the toe. It's a well-written pattern. The only thing that I noticed the first time that I knit these socks was that the pattern was written for 60 stitches around the instep, and I prefer a 64 stitch sock. So I just made a couple of modifications. I didn't do the decreases that were recommended when you get to the instep, and I added a couple of extra stitches here on the instep, and that has made for a slightly bigger sock, which fits my foot a bit better. This sock pattern, I have noticed, stays on your foot nicely. Sometimes socks with this kind of wide opening at the ankle or instep can tend to slide off your heel, but this one doesn't. It also has a nice little tab sort of at the back that would sit over the top of your sneaker so that your sneaker doesn't rub on your ankle, and it also helps keep your socks on. So I'm quite happy with how this one turned out, and I will be knitting another one quickly. It's such a small sock that it whips up quickly, and so I thought I would make this pair for myself and try them out a little bit and see how I like them. And then if I like them, I think I'll be knitting a few more pairs, because it's a great way to use up some of the old like leftover self-striping sock yarn that I have lying around. It takes very little yarn, and they knit up quickly, and I think that in the summer these are the kinds of socks that I would be wearing a lot. So I made the first one. I'll be casting on the second one soon, and I'll just be giving them a try maybe over the next couple of weeks, and if it's something that I really like, I think I'll be knitting more of them, because they're so small, they take a little bit of yarn, and I think that there's something that I would wear a lot. But I'll try this pair out first and see how we go, and if they are successful and there's something that I really like, then I'll be knitting more pairs. So I find in the spring, this is a pattern for me. I start looking for things that I will be wearing in the spring and summer months. Now, is that something you do? Are you a seasonal knitter? I'm pretty sure that last year around this time, I was looking for some sneaker socks as well. So I'll be trying these out. The other thing that has sort of piqued my interest are some market bags. I have knit myself some market bags in the past, and I use them a ton. I knit them out of different linen fingering weight yarns, and they're great. They get a lot of use. I love them because they're really hardy, they're very stretchy, and I just throw them in my washer and dryer and they're good to go again. So I've been thinking about making some more market bags, and in looking at different patterns, I decided that I would try crocheting a market bag. The market bag I have in mind is called the Weekend Wanderer bag. This is a bento style bag, which I really sort of was intrigued by the shape and how it comes together. It's a free pattern. I will post a picture of the Weekend Warrior here, and I'll also put a link to the pattern below. Now, this bag is crocheted as a big rectangle that you then fold and sew together. So I'm looking forward to casting on. Is it casting on when you're crocheting? I'm looking forward to starting this project just as something different. I do need to pick up the right size crochet hook, so that is on my list of things to do this weekend. And then just casting on and giving this a try. And if this is a pattern that I like, then it could be that I make a few more as Christmas gifts. It seems that in this springtime, I start thinking of Christmas gifts, and so this is something that I have on the back of my mind, is trying out this pattern and seeing if I like it, and then if I do, then it might be something that I work up as some gifts for Christmas time. So the Weekend Wanderer bag is on my radar. The other thing that's on my radar right now is the outline tank. Now this is a tank by Jessie May Designs. She has an array of different tanks and t-shirts and little shorts that are available in a myriad of sizes. Her size range is amazingly inclusive. One of the amazing things about Jessie May is that she gets a lot of her patterns test knit by a really large number of test knitters. Those test knitters vary across the size range that she offers, but they also vary in body shape and skin tone. So it's amazing to see the number of patterns in her pattern base when her patterns come out, because she has so many different test knitters in such a variety of shapes, for one thing, that if you are interested in her patterns, you will probably find someone who has test knit that pattern in a body shape that is somewhat similar to yours, and that is brilliant. Because if you're not a sort of standard size or shape, it can be difficult to know how a project is going to look on you, especially when a pattern just comes out. So I love the fact that she gets so many people to test knit her projects, and that they are so different in their style and their body shape and their skin tone. It's just beautiful. So her outline tank is something that came out, and I've already been sort of thinking about maybe knitting myself a tank top or something lightweight, a shell maybe for spring. The outline tank has just come out, and it's something that I am very interested in trying out. She uses dropped stitches to create a sort of laddering effect on her tank, and it's really cute, and it looks amazing on so many of her models. So this is something that is on my radar, and I think it's something that I will be looking into knitting as the weather slowly warms up here. So I guess in Joline Knits A Lot land, I've got shorty socks, market bags, and tank tops on my radar. I'll let you know as those things get on my needles or jump off my needles. Hopefully by next time I have some different types of projects, and maybe I've started to work on some of these things. What sorts of things do you knit in the spring? Do you knit seasonally, or do you just knit the same thing all year round? I know some people who just have a passion for socks, and they just knit socks all year. Or maybe they love knitting shawls or lace or cables. I find that I'm sort of I'm a seasonally affected knitter. I may have just made that up. But I like knitting for the season that's coming up, for what's happening next. And so now I'm looking forward to springy kind of knits like this tank top, some market bags, and some sneaker shoes, so that I'll be all ready for when the sun warms up Edmonton and it's time for shorts weather again. How about you? What are you knitting? I can't wait to hear. If you're knitting interesting things for the season right now, let me know in the comments below. Or if you like knitting the same things all the time, let me know. Are you already knitting for Christmas? Because apparently I already have some Christmas knits on my mind. What do you like to knit? Let me know. Thanks so much for joining me today and listening to me blather on about the things I'm working on and the things I'm planning on working on. I hope that you find some time to work on your crafty things in the next little while. I know that I plan on knitting and crocheting a lot. Bye.